Hello and welcome to Exchanges for another week. Care leadership and leadership in general in a environment where revolution, and that's the correct term, has never been stronger. AI, the change in AI, working from home, understanding that actually productive teams fall into the same as sports teams, that teams that work together, understand their goals, know that their team has their back, leads to better outcomes. It's surprising that, we don't see that. But as my guest today will show, we still go through scenarios where we just don't take it the way we should in institutions. Graeme Cowan is an incredible person to be talking to right now. He is the co-founder of Are You OK Day, but also the journey that he has been through around leadership and what he does in the leadership battle to make sure that we all understand that working teams that work in a way that strive to work in a caring, psychologically safe environment actually has the better outcome than the old idea of macro leadership. So without any further ado, here's this week's exchange with Graeme Cowan. Graeme Cowan, welcome to Exchanges. You've had an absolutely incredible career. Your entrepreneurship, your changes in your career have been, something that you've noted down in 3 different books across a whole range of thought processes. So can I get you to start then, before we really dive into sort of the leadership stuff that you do and about care leadership, etc. Talk me through your journey that has been this incredible learning of leadership through experience, but also through your campaigns like Are You OK?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Lovely to join you. And it has been a bit of a roller coaster at times. I started off in sales and marketing and worked for Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer. Then went into executive search and culture change with a group called Kearney, a global management consulting company. And it was while I was there and I was co-leading the executive search division, there was a really big market correction. It was the last tech crash. And basically, I crashed and burned, even though I was the leader. And I was out of work for 5 years. My marriage broke down, had to go and live with my parents. And I remember being up there, in Foster, a beautiful spot. And I was in the kitchen overlooking the beach and, everything was great out there. But I felt really, really sorry for myself. As I said, I'd been out of work for a long time. I remember saying to my mother, why me, why me? And she hit me in the eyes with one of those mother stares and said, I believe you'll use this situation to help other people. And I thought it was all a bit crazy then. I wrote, a series in the Back from the Brink book range. And that led to me meeting Gavin Larkin, who was the founder of Are You OK in March 2009. And in that year, there was just a core team of 4 of us, just part-time people. And we managed to get the first year off the ground. Gavin and I launched it in Parliament House in Canberra. And, we were really pleased with that, the first year. And of course, it's built, quite substantially over that time now. And it's one of the, most known mental health unprompted charities in Australia. It's incredible what it's become. And then my work has sort of changed a bit over the last 10 years. I've really been about, helping leaders to build resilient and successful teams without losing their great people to burnout. And that led to my latest book, Great Leaders Care. So hopefully that's a good overview of how I got here.
It is, because I want to go back to that sort of 2000 period, that dot-com bubble that you experienced with the redundancy that you sort of went through and the crash and burn, but also that generation, sort of that 97 through 2002 period where there was quite a lot of rockiness. The markets were all over the shop. There was definitely a fair amount of unemployment floating up and down and redundancies there. Can you first and foremost take me through the way that you were experienced being sort of moved on? Because there is a great group of listeners on this program that have gone through that period, that went through that late mid 90s through to the early 2000s, where we sort of still see it as a period of time where, HR and leadership care was very much done, but it clearly wasn't, because it was basically, you're redundant, you're out, go and do it with it yourself. Was that how you felt it too?
It wasn't entirely that way. The business definitely collapsed a lot, and some of our people we had to let go. But it was really, I had this really onset of depression myself. I was putting this mask on each day, not sleeping at night, feeling really anxious, and it just gradually wore down. And it was really me not being able to work that led to me finally leaving. I wasn't super pressed, but it was just a very, very tough time for the business. But I wasn't in great shape myself then.
So can compare that period to what you now see and the programs that you integrate with the leadership that's different from then to now?
It's just changed hugely. And, I think one of the big things is that there's less stigma about mental health issues, particularly in the community, but also in the workplace. There's still a long way to go in the workplace, but there is more openness and discussion about that. And, a lot of organisations, celebrate Are You OK Day and try to keep that momentum going all year round. So it has been terrific. And I think in a small way, I also helped to contribute to that. In my first book, Back from the Brink, I interviewed 12 people who'd been through some really tough times and bounced back. And some of those were people like the former West Australian Premier, Jeff Gallop, to gold medal Olympic swimmers, John Conrades and Petria Thomas, the icon of the art world, Margaret Olley. And so that helped to normalise it a bit. And when I launched the book, the person who helped me was John Brogden, the former opposition leader. And we launched it at the Black Dog Institute. And what was really surprising is that SBS News came, and we were actually featured on SBS News that night, which was a big, big change. And that then led to lots of interviews about it and talking about my story and the stories of others in the book. But we've made great progress, but there's still a way to go.
I also then sort of going through what you've done in that post world, so particularly around workplace mental health and the Caring CEO series that you've been doing. When do you feel that inflection point happened? Because for me, I'm obviously a little bit younger in terms of where you are, but I remember there was a very big difference between, even as I said, the early 2000s, even early 2010s to now, where there was this change. What do you feel it was? Is it just pure anecdotal? Was there actually an inflection point in your eyes about how we now see mental health, how it impacts institutions in ways that I don't think previously they ever saw, because it was always just black and white. The numbers tell us this, and that's what we do.
Yeah, well, when my first books came out, there really wasn't much awareness at all. And Are You OK played a role in helping to change that. And then probably about 5 years ago, Are You OK wasn't just about the day, but other organisations embraced it for their industry. So, for example, the rail industry had a special Are You OK week dedicated to them, and other industries as well, the car industry, the hospitality industry, the legal industry. And I think that just sort of helped to create momentum. And one of the biggest elements, and it wasn't just Are You OK, other groups like, Beyond Blue and Black Dog were doing good work in the area as well, but there was sharing of stories. And it's when stories become common and memorable, that's when you do feel change, because what I've found in my life is that when I share my story, it gives other people permission to share theirs. And everyone has their own story, whether it's themselves personally or a loved one or a work colleague. I think there is recognition that does go across society these days. And, often in my keynote, I ask people, who here has someone close to them, either in their home life or work life, that lives with depression, bipolar, anxiety? And it's like 80% of the room put their hand up. So that has been great progress. But one of the reasons why I decided to write this book was that I had this hunch that a mentally healthy team was a more productive team. And I remember in 2016, there was this article in the New York Times called What Google Learned in Its Quest to Build the Perfect Team.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, it featured their exploration and something which is called Project Aristotle. And they looked at 180 teams around the world and 220 factors in each team. And at first, they thought it was going to be individual qualities, like are there more high performers in the team? Is there better diversity in the team? But they couldn't find that. What they found was that there were 5 team norms that led to these great, innovative, and successful teams. And those 5 norms were psychological safety was one. Number 2 was dependability. We do what we say we're going to do. Number 3 was clarity about milestones and goals and expectations. Number 4 was about meaning. We really relate to the work we do. It's personally important. And number 5 was purpose. We're contributing to the purpose of our organisation. But by far the most important was psychological safety. And it featured then Amy Edmondson, a professor at Harvard, who's a global thought leader in this space. And I thought, I've got to meet her. I've got to interview her. So I did interview her on the Caring CEO podcast. And her work shows overwhelmingly that when it's psychologically safe, and that's when you can be your authentic self, it means you can contribute ideas and they're welcome, but you can also challenge ideas that you don't agree with. And the very, very best teams really strive for that sort of openness and transparency. And it is how, you get really good innovation happening and ultimately performance.
Yeah, so because I'm glad you sort of alleviated on the psychological safety one, because it's a new concept, I think, in terms of how we look at it. There is no doubt, and I can hear, having worked in the places that I've worked in previously, that kind of innovation that you're talking about that Google found, and then obviously the studies from Harvard are showing, a lot of managers when I was going through, particularly in the 10s and all the way up to the 20, would be resistant to that. They would definitely be resistant to it. How do you get them to break through that? Because what you're also saying there is that the challenge comes from subordinates. It comes from lower down.
Yeah.
It will slow down decision making in their eyes, and therefore it will slow down what they're geared, inverted commas, to do, which is drive their division forward through whatever matters to them. How does that work?
Well, let's just say, 10 years ago, it was probably more command and control. Do this, do this, do this, follow that. And it was, the way that work was done. But I think what has really happened, and, it's only accelerated in the last 2 years, is there's just so much rapid change in the workplace that no one person has the insight or divine wisdom to make the best decisions. You really need to tap into the insight and the knowledge of the team to reach that best situation. And Amy Edmondson refers it as leading like a scientist. And what she means by that is that, you hear all this stuff, but you can never be 100% certain. You might be 70% certain. And what that is you set a hypothesis and put that hypothesis into action. That's what we're going to try here now. But you also put an end date, and that's often like 90 days, to review how it's going. And if it's working, great, we go down hard with it. But if it's not working, we regather, we learn quickly, and then we evolve and try something again. And, that term of just making the best decision at that time. And I've heard, funnily enough, Jeff Bezos, he runs by the 70% rule as well.
Mm-hmm.
That if you wait for 100%, you're too late. You'll miss the bus sort of thing. So I think it's those experiences and really, really successful teams and fast growing teams that have shown that this is the way to do it. And the older, more traditional firms are realizing they have to do it as well. They have to have more entrepreneurs inside the business.
Because that comes into my world with regards to what I'm currently talking a lot about, is that this drive for almost certainty in the decision making being done. So the numbers tell me so. And that's what's driving decision making. And for me, what you've just alluded to is exactly where those firms that aren't waiting for the certain answer, but are using enough information to make an exploratory decision making is the way forward. And so again, I want to come back to what you do with particularly, your new book, which is Great Leaders Care, about how you integrate clearly what institutions need to consider, which is, the driving force of it, making sure that clearly it is moving towards, if it's a listed company, shareholders obviously are certainly front and center with most managers' position. But what you've alluded to in your career, but also in your books, is that to get there, it's about bringing all stakeholders forward with you and being willing to make, inverted commas, a risk decision call without perfect information. Where is that now going with regards to particularly the psychological safety comment you said before as well?
Yeah, well, it's become even more important. As you well know, Evan, the AI revolution is just disrupting every organization, every single one. And we need to work better together. And what I call a great leaders care mindset is where we champion self-care, taking care of ourselves and our own resilience and energy. Crew care, which is building these psychologically safe and really engaged teams. And red zone care, which is about able to identify someone who's struggling and support them through that. Now, what I often do now in my keynotes is I tell the story of Are You OK? That start from such humble beginnings to what it is now, and launching it on the deck of the HMAS Adelaide, Australia's largest frigate, in 10 years after the launch. And, when I reflect back, I often say that, it was one of the best teams that I've been in terms of we had virtually no resources, no full-time employees, no money in those first 3 or 4 years, but, gradually we moved it forward and ahead. And so then I asked people to reflect on a great team they've been part of. It could be in their current role or a previous role, or when they worked at McDonald's or a sports team, rugby or netball or whatever. And I asked people to, visualize the people in that team and what made it different to an average team. And then I had them to vote, use a Menti QR code. And there's about 10 different answers there. Everything from, a compelling vision, a great strategy, complementary strengths, and ask people to nominate their top 3. And in 95% of the cases, the top 3 are: we cared about each other, we had each other's back, and we encouraged each other. And these are basic human needs, for connection and belonging. But there's also some incredibly strong evidence to show that this care leads to high performance. The Gallup organisation have been looking at engagement, discretionary effort for about the last 30 years. They've now got it down to just 12 statements, what they call the Q12, to determine whether someone is motivated and able. But one of those statements is, my supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the more people that strongly agree with this, the higher the productivity, profit, customer service levels, and the longer people stay with an organization. So this, the care isn't a soft skill, it's a strong skill, which is a high performance driver if you get it right.
Does it need to therefore be just one, or does it need to be more? Like, is it the whole team that needs to be seen as the care, or as you just said in the survey, that one person at work cares about me? Because what you said before about those 3 top things, I would argue that's exactly what any particularly sports team strives for, right? Which is that my teammate has my back, that
Yeah.
I am in an environment where we're all striving for the same thing and that we all know our roles and we celebrate when we all do our roles correctly. So just going back to your answer there, that's a team mentality and a team thought process. Does an institution sort of see an exponential increase if they get not just one, but multiple people?
Yeah, very much so. But a large part does come down to the leader or manager.
Mm-hmm.
Gallup show that they contribute 70% towards the engagement and well-being of the team. So they have a massive impact. But team members can also play a great role with that, in terms of being connected, encouraging each other, recognizing what's happening. It's everyone, but it must start with the manager or the leader to make a big difference.
I'm going to challenge you on that one as well, because the other thing that is and has been a pretty stereotypical thing of institutions is quantity over quality with leadership sometimes, which is that somebody has been there an X amount of time and have sort of climbed the slippery pole, shall we call, and have got into leadership positions more out of survival and out of politics than out of quality. How do you look at that in this day and age? As you've already said, and I'm going to come back to the AI thing because I wanted to really drag into that at the end, but I want to talk to you about that kind of leader that has found themselves probably in a position they shouldn't be because they're not necessarily the leadership you've just discussed, and how those in the subordinate position under those kinds of people in the current environment can deal with a leader that is not a leader. They're a micromanager and clearly a detractor for the team.
Well, I guess the first thing I'd say is that they're on a very limited timescale, because there's just too much change happening for the old command and control, the old politicking, and politics, of course, still happens. But more and more organizations are having pulse surveys where, they measure employees on a week-by-week basis. Might just say it's ask them one or two questions. But more and more, it's becoming very obvious whether a team's pulling together, a leader is doing the right thing around the team. I really don't believe that old politicking, command and control can survive in the world of AI.
So that let's get to that, because this is the big thing about AI, particularly in teams, particularly in larger institutions, is that the newest members of the team, so graduates, younger, experienced providers, so those probably that are only 2 to 6 years into the workforce, they are the ones that believe, not necessarily true just yet, but believe that AI is more likely than not coming for their jobs. But what you're alluding to is that it's actually the whole institution, that if they don't innovate and they don't bend with the times, it's not about how level of experience, it's about the quality you're putting in. Is that how you see the AI revolution impacting teams and leadership and organizations?
Yeah, and you're right. Those in the first sort of 5 or 6 years of their work life have been much closer to this, much more involved with how things have evolved. But everyone in an organization needs to understand it. Everyone needs to experiment with it. Everyone needs to gradually improve your knowledge about it. Each week it's just changing so quickly, and if you don't do that, it's hard to imagine that you can survive longer term. There is the old saying that you won't be replaced by AI, but you'll be replaced by someone who uses it really well and has really developed themselves. And I've just been as a a senior member, a very senior member of the workforce. I've never seen anything like that, but I've never seen anything like the benefits it brings as well. And just one example of that, I've done 90 episodes now of The Caring CEO, and each of those episodes is about 3,000 or 4,000 words in a transcript. And the thought of going through that personally and summarizing it and going through it is just too big to even contemplate. But, I really worked with experimenting with, 3 different types, ChatGPT, Perplexity and Claude, and working with prompts. And I found that for the written word, that Claude was by far the best.
Mm.
And once I got those prompts right, it could do a whole podcast in literally 15 seconds or so, which would have taken me, I don't know, 2 to 3 hours each sort of thing. So in all of our work, there's places where it's working really, really well and quickly now, and it'll keep moving, and we need to keep moving with it.
Yeah. Again, the way that I look at it is that it is accelerating industrial revolutions at speeds and paces that we've clearly never seen before, but it also follows the traditional curve, which is, if you look at the first industrial revolution through the UK and what that took about 150 years, the revolution with America, that took about 90. If you look at Japan, it took, and sort of places like Singapore, South Korea, it took 40 years. China took 30 years. The digital revolution with the internet took 20. AI is, we forget, started realistically in November 23, and we are not even halfway through 2026, and it's moving at a faster rate than any of that. Yeah. So again, the only thing that I've got to come back to is, how do leaders deal with the fact that we are automating ourselves, right? That's what this is doing. It is automating and almost turning us robotically into, a robot system. How do we continue to make sure that we use AI in a caring, group-orientated way that not just increases efficiency and productivity, but also increases the output that the team still needs it and still has to be there to drive us forward?
Well, the things that AI can't replace at the moment, and probably for quite a while going forward, is the human element, the care element. And that's about being able to develop a strategy and inspire team members to follow it as well and embrace it as well. Being able to recognize when someone is working really well and has the potential to take on something that they may not have done before. Being able to recognize when someone just seems really burnt out and frazzled by it, and to see if they need help or coaching in a certain area. Having empathy for clients, AI can't do that as well. So these human skills, being able to, and of course also building this culture of care, they can't do that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there's elements they can play, but the true human reaction and the human bond and the belonging is what is just gold now. And the best leaders and also the best team members need to get better at that, better at what used to be called the soft skills, but I now call the strong skills, because the team mood determines the team performance. Like, that happens very much on the individual level. If you're in the green zone on a moodometer, in the top third, Harvard research shows that you're 31% more productive, yourself 37% more, and you're 200% more creative. These are all incredibly important elements in a rapidly changing environment. But teams also have moods as well. And, I write about the team mood elements here in my book. And, in the green zone, people are we-oriented. They contribute approximately equally in a team meeting. It's not a democracy, but the very best leaders ask those who are, introverts who don't naturally speak very willingly to give their thoughts. And often those people, when they are prompted to speak, have some really, really great ideas. So, all these things, these human elements, the personal mood, the team mood, I really say now to manage your mood, not your time, because, keeping yourself in that green zone is a critical strategy to do well with this volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world of work.
That brings into another thing that's sort of in the post-COVID world that has come about in terms of the mood question you've just put to there is, do you think, therefore, that the 15-hour workday player, or the team driving for not working from home, or the real overworking scenario that we had probably leading up into the GFC, where it was just basically seen as standard and seen as needed. Do you think therefore it's sort of had its day, because we've now got AI that can increase our efficiency, but as you just said, the more productive time is actually when you're in that green zone. Does that what you're sort of forecasting?
Yeah, it is very much that way. And you talk about someone doing the 15-hour day. It's just been shown that you can't do that. You can't sustain that. You might be really, really busy, but are you stepping back and saying, how can we use AI or the contribution of other people to build the performance of the team? And to do that, you really need time for reflection. You can't be busy, because you're not questioning if that busyness is leading to effectiveness and leading to better decisions, more innovation. So I think it's particularly important for everyone to be reflecting at a time during the week that makes a real difference, where you can think about what's gone well, what hasn't got well, what could we change going forward. And there's a CEO coach called Anthony Howard, who I've also interviewed on my podcast, and he encourages all his clients to set up a time for reflection where there's no meetings. And usually that's on Friday afternoon. And, the CEO does it and encourages his team to look at it. And then on Monday morning, when they're, talking about the week ahead, they have a quick catch up about what that insight was, what that reflection was. And that can help rejig the plans for the week ahead.
I'd have to agree. And I think what's going forward is a revolution, not just in the tech world, but also in the working world. I can't believe we've already gone through a half an hour. So I'm going to have to come already to my final question that I ask all of my guests, Graeme, which is, Graeme Cowan, if you're in charge for just one day, what would you do?
I would invite people to consider this, that the quality of our life is determined by the quality of our relationships. And quality relationships require investment in time. They should be enjoyable, but you also should be comfortable being vulnerable with that tight-knit group around you. They're our scaffolding when things get tough. They're also our cheer squads when we're in a good place. So, just invest in the quality of relationships.
I think that's a perfect way to finish what has been an incredible exchange. Graeme Cowan, thank you so much for joining Exchanges.
My pleasure. Evan, it's been great to talk to you.
Big thank you to Graeme. It's been an absolute incredible exchange. The thought leadership that he has, the experience, the life story himself, so incredibly insightful, so incredibly motivating to actually get leadership to be seen as a productive mover rather than just there as a way of commanding and conquering, as he puts it. To you out there, as always, thank you so much for listening, watching, and everything in between. Don't forget, we do have feedback channels. It's the exchanges@evanlucas.com.au email, but also the subscription and the comments. If you haven't, please subscribe. Only 32% of you listening do. So please, wherever you are getting this, please hit that subscribe button. The more we can, the faster we grow, and the more and more guests like Graeme we can get onto the program. But to all of you out there, thank you so much for listening and watching, and we look forward to seeing you next week.